think about how Counter-Strike makes you feel. Not in the sense of, oh, it's a fun game I play with friends, but more like how it really makes you feel. The highs of an ace, or the thrills of a clutch. Just take a moment to think about what that felt like to you. Okay, now think about everything else. The days where you're tired, where you're maybe missing your shots, or the moments of stress when you're down 11 to 12 and you need to take it into overtime because you know you're better than the other team, but in your words,
they just play weird.
What feelings do these cases invoke? Well, that might depend on your rank or your hours. It might depend on if you play casually or if you want to grind up to level 10 on Faceit or 30k in Premiere. Now that you've thought about it, let's find out what exactly helps and hurts our game so we can know how to use these emotions to win more matches. The first thing you should think about while playing is tilt, or rage. Tilt is defined by Dr. Minerva Wu as a gaming phenomenon where an emotional response, typically negative, leads to the deterioration of gameplay. For the sake of this video, we won't be talking about what Dr. Wu considers positive tilt because it's really just being overconfident, and this will be covered in a different category later on in the video. Tilting happens all the time. Maybe you peek an angle, then it's like the guy on the other side of the screen has the best reaction time ever and you never stood a chance. Or maybe it comes from within your team as somebody criticizes your gameplay or your decision making. Regardless of where it comes from, we know it is something that ultimately leads to negative emotions, less clarity, and overall poor gameplay. So just stop tilting, right? Well, it's not quite that simple. You see, tilting is a response we all have before we even know we're gonna have it. Tilt comes from our amygdala, a section of the brain that regulates our fight or flight responses. When we lose or play games that really get us amped up, our bodies can actually respond as though we're facing an actual threat to our survival. This will also affect the rest of our nervous system. These parts combined, along with our biology as humans, has already decided to be angry before you have even chosen what foul arrangement of words you want to hurl at the enemy, your teammate, or the rest of your team. But that does not mean it's uncontrollable. Recent studies that focus on esport professionals noted that tilt may not always be outbursts like breaking something or slamming a desk, but actually might be more subtle. These studies showed that more often tilt was expressed in ways like a lack of communication after some bad rounds and a decrease in overall attention to the game as our brain tries to distance us from the threat. That's what makes tilting so dangerous. It might not always look like you're negatively affecting your game or your team, but you're slowly chipping away at your own morale, giving less and less information to your team and checking out of the game. So how do you actually deal with it in the moment? A 2025 study on League of Legends esports players looked at exactly this and found that players who managed tilt the best weren't the ones who never felt it, they were just the ones that had a process for catching it early. The most common strategies were muting comms if a teammate was making it worse instead of engaging, deliberately refocusing attention onto something concrete like your next position rather than your last death, and just accepting that bad rounds can happen instead of replaying it in your head in between rounds. It sounds almost too simple, but the players who did this consistently were the ones who didn't let one bad round become 4 or 5 bad rounds. Even something as small as a 10-second breather before you unmute your mic and talk again can be the difference between tilting your team or having one rough round that nobody will remember. While tilt is important to identify quickly and can be difficult to deal with as the game progresses, there's another form of negativity I see in players that I coach all the time, and that's anxiety. While anxiety can look different from player to player, I looked at studies to find the most common anxieties as well as asked some of the players I personally coach to see what makes them anxious in the game. As a side note, one of the anxiety studies I read about esports professionals claimed that esports pros can play almost more than 22 hours a week and emphasized that as a really long time. And when I look at my Steam list, I have friends that are averaging well over that and are not pros. Some of them aren't even that good. So I just thought that was kind of funny because it's like kind of a boomer take, you know, it's their job. It's going to be more than 22 hours. They're going to be working more than 22 hours. The most common answer I got from players is that their anxiety could arise simply from just hitting the accept button. A lot of these players solo queue or play outside of a 5-stack. They mentioned that the anxiety of a match mostly came from the uncertainty in what type of players they were going to get, and at the lower and mid-tier ranks of the game, these players almost all wrote off a match as potentially toxic or a loss upon loading in when they were playing solo and paired with a stack of 3 or more players. This type of anxiety anxiety unfortunately can be hard to navigate because it's built on previous negative experiences and oftentimes a lack of communication from the teammates that you're playing with. Another common anxiety I saw from players was just due to the lack of confidence they had. I see all the time as players rank up, they feel as though they don't belong in that rank despite earning it themselves. This comes from maybe one or two bad games where they felt like they didn't do too much to help their team. And oftentimes when I review these demos with them, I see that they in fact are helping their team, though they might not be the top frag and they could even be going negative. In these matches, I see that they're getting more impactful frags, or playing the objective in the time, ultimately winning the rounds that their team does need, but in their mind, if they're not on the top of the scoreboard and the other 9 players aren't celebrating them, then they aren't playing well. Because of this, they start to crumble and fall off towards the end of the game, or they maybe never pick up the momentum that they could have had, all because of their mindset. Other anxieties might just come from performance. Players get into games and play maps the exact same way, despite each map having its own playstyle, with some of them, like Nuke or Overpass, RIP, playing vastly different. This can again play into the confidence of players and cause them to get into their own heads about whether they're top frag, how good their KD is, where their positioning is going wrong, or even the amount of MVPs that they have. It's important in these moments to ground yourself, look at the mistakes you've made in previous rounds, and learn from them instead of dwelling on them. This mindset will allow you to stay in the match despite how you're performing, and in turn, keep you and your team competitive. It's also important to note that some players might have anxieties around things that are more out of their control. Factors like age, gender, or even mental and physical conditions might cause you to receive toxic responses from other players. It's important not to let this deter you. While playing ranked, you are matched with players in your own skill level, sometimes slightly higher, sometimes slightly lower depending on the elo dispersion, but knowing this, despite any of those factors you may have, like these other players, you are just as capable in the server and should go into the match with confidence knowing that. So what can actually help with your anxiety? Sports psychology research has a name for one of the most effective tools. It's cognitive reappraisal, basically retraining your brain to read that pre-match feeling not as, oh, something bad is going to happen, but as something more positive. Physiologically, anxiety and excitement can feel almost identical. A faster heart rate, that jittery energy, it's your brain's interpretation of the feeling that decides whether it's going to help or hurt you. Studies on performance under pressure found that athletes who reframe that nervous energy as readiness instead of a threat perform measurably better than athletes who try to suppress and ignore it. So next time you hit the accept button and you feel that spike, don't fight it, just relabel it. It's not dread, it's your chance to lock in before the game has even started. And for specific solo queue anxiety, research on esports players consistently found one factor made the biggest difference regardless of skill level. That's social support. Even something as small as a teammate who communicates well and doesn't pile on after a bad round measurably improves how players cope with pressure. So if you're the one queuing with randos, you can actually be the factor for someone else just by staying calm and talking through it instead of going silent. Along with anxiety, I see a lot of players struggle dealing with stress in a match. This is something very common in all players, whether it's a rank up match or just a normal game. Studies show that high stakes matches and in-game situations like clutching amplify stress, leading to mental fatigue, visible stress or adrenaline related reactions, and changes in heart rate variability. This of course changes from person to person depending on many factors such as lifestyle, how they cope with stress, and even experience in the game that they're playing. As with anxiety in these moments, it is important to give yourself a second to think, regulate your mind, and use your best judgment to clutch, plan, or carry on with the next round. Research on stress during clutch performance points towards something specific. Elite players under pressure use box breathing. 4 seconds in, hold for 4 seconds, 4 seconds out, hold for 4 seconds, and repeat to physically calm the nervous system down before the round even starts. It sounds almost too basic to matter and a little corny, but it directly counteracts the fight or flight response we already talked about with tilt. Slower breathing lowers the heart rate, and a lower heart rate means steadier aim and clearer decisions. There's also research on what's called approach coping, which basically means facing the stressor head on instead of avoiding it, and it has been shown to actually prevent the kind of choking that ruins clutching in rounds. Basically, what this means is don't play the round not to lose, play it the way you'd play any other round. The players that overthink and spend too much time are oftentimes the ones that choke it. The players who stick to their normal decision making under pressure are the ones that clutch. Our final negative emotion is disappointment. Counter-Strike, as we know, does not come with guaranteed wins. In fact, if you look at your win rate sometimes, it might feel like it comes with guaranteed losses. This is where the feeling of disappointment can come in. Maybe you've mastered your tilt, your anxiety, and your stress. You're top fragging, giving out some amazing strats and calls, but your team is not executing. They're just losing duels and making seemingly simple, aha, there he is again, number 3, baby, mistakes. This can come with a lot of disappointment, causing you to fall back into an angry, tilted, stressed, or anxious mindset. These feelings can be invoked in game by losing an easy fight or a round, but they can also build up in the matches that you've lost and deranking. This can often be out of your control and is just a part of the game. It can be something easy to get past or something that lingers over you in your play session. If you allow it to affect you though, disappointment can and will affect your ability to make decisions. As stated in the 2011 scientific journal, the impact of disappointment in decision making, inter-individual differences in electrical neuroimaging, they state disappointment influences decision making because individuals try to minimize future negative emotions. This is why we can often see ourselves or other players getting riskier or trying to overperform when they're disappointed by things like the leaderboard or our KD ratio. It's not that we're being careless for the sake of throwing, but rather for our own selfish reasons of padding stats or being the best player in the server. As we know, this often comes with negative results. I tend to see players in the state achieving the opposite of what they were intending, while I see players that don't focus on their personal disappointments as much, either top fragging or winning more games, regardless of playing in a stack or not. So how exactly do you deal with disappointment before it turns into a spiral? Research on lowering your goals or overcorrecting just to avoid the feeling of being disappointed again found something very interesting. That instinct is actually counterproductive, as I mentioned, and people who were made aware of it were able to catch themselves before acting on it. In other words, just knowing that your brain wants to overreact to disappointment is enough to counter the effect. The other tool here is the same cognitive reappraisal that we talked about with anxiety, except pointed backwards instead of forwards. Instead of we lost because my team is bad, it's we lost this round, here's specifically what didn't work. One is a dead end and it just breeds more tilting, while the other is information you can actually use for the following rounds. The players who bounce back the fastest from a bad round aren't the ones who feel disappointment less, they're the ones that convert it into a specific fixable thought instead of a vague, pointless one. Now that we've covered negative effects of our mental game, let's cover the positive. It goes without saying we see players perform better when they're confident. The same way we see this projected in many ways with negative emotions, we see this in positive as well. Confidence is described as a firm belief or trust in someone or something, or a feeling of self-reassurance in your own abilities. When you trust yourself to accomplish tasks, or believe your teammates have the skills to accomplish theirs, you're able to let go of some of the stressors and negative emotions that would otherwise distract you. Confidence can have a darker side though. Remember that positive tilt I mentioned earlier? This is that overconfidence, and it can come out at quite a cost. You see, being too confident and letting go of certain stressors can cause you to get into an almost autopilot style of play, where you assume safety because your teammate was previously watching the flank or another angle, but once your teammate changes positions or does something that you don't expect, your confidence in them can come crashing down, especially if you're killed. This can quickly send you back on track to experience any of the 4 negative emotions we mentioned. Our next positive is not so much an emotion, but more a feeling that comes from success, and it's flow. We all know the feeling of being in the flow, the zone, or as the kids call it, being locked in. I swear, I'm not unk, it's just for the script. It's when you don't exactly have to worry about your crosshair. It just seems to be right where it needs to be every time, and you seem to be reacting faster than you ever have before. It's a great feeling. You're happy, you're proud of your shots and clutches, and you feel good. Psychologists describe it as being so absorbed in a task that self-consciousness disappears, and time itself can feel distorted. This often occurs when we see the skill of players on the other team match that of our own personal skill. If they're too bad, you get bored. If they're too good, you get stressed. But when they're right there with you, it's like you're locked in. Many times we see players that are chasing the consistency that flow brings being the ones that improve the most drastically. This is because in chasing that consistent feeling across your game, you're going to practice more things like movement, aiming, or other mechanics that players might neglect if they're just training to win, either by stomping with kills or outsmarting the enemy team with strats. A player chasing the zone will have the balance between these two players along with other attributes to add on. And if you're wanting to chase that flow and that consistency, look no further than today's sponsor, Refrag. Refrag is an all-in-one Counter-Strike training platform used by actual pros to sharpen their mechanics and warm up before matches. It's a platform to help you train smarter. Instead of grinding mindless death matches, you can can load into custom modes designed to perfect your spray control, master your utility, and carry the rest of your team. If you want to stop losing your duels and start climbing the ranks, go to play.refrag.gg/redeem and use code TORQ after making your account. Massive thanks to Refrag for sponsoring the video. Next, we have motivation. Your motivation will really depend on your mood. Sometimes you're going to feel determined to get that win, and other times you might feel down and like your hard work has all been in vain. But both of these moods can spark your motivation. One way to deal with losses and disappointment is to use it as motivation. Take a minute or two, gather yourself and your team, and use that previous loss as a reason to try harder, to come into the game clear and level-headed. But notice what I said, gather yourself and your team. This is very important. You'll need to try your best to take that feeling of defeat and hopelessness and turn it into something more helpful, which could look as simple as getting back into the neutral feeling or allowing it to fuel the fire in your team to go harder next match and find that zone. Finally, we have happiness and excitement. Do you remember that ace you got or that clutch you pulled out of thin air? What about that time you read the enemy like a book and you got those accusations? These are feelings we chase. They're the highlights of our matches and they bring us happiness and excitement. Our brains will actually reward us for making these decisions and plays with dopamine, a chemical responsible for feelings of reward and pleasure. It helps us with our body movement and coordination, improves our focus and attention, as well as helping us drive our motivation to do things. These emotions are the reason we come back to the game, and tapping into these does not have to be hard. You can simply find this by joking with your team, playing matches with your friends, or just going into the match with a better mindset. Although, an ace clutch is a pretty sick dopamine hit. These are the 8 main emotions and feelings of Counter-Strike, 4 that may creep up and destroy your game, and 4 that will allow you to stay in it and win. Counter-Strike is just as much a mental game as it is a mechanical game, and if you can find a way to use these emotions or coping skills to your advantage, you will find the game to be much more fun and maybe even a bit easier. Thank you for watching this video. I enjoyed making it and researching it. All the articles will be linked below in the description if you'd like to check them out. If you did enjoy it, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, and as always, it's been TORQ, and I'll see you in matchmaking.